Hello everybody, welcome back. If we've never met before, my name is Sharon and I'm happy that you're studying with me today. So in a previous video we started learning about how to use sources in our writing. Specifically, we learned about using quotations. So we're following that today and we're going to talk about direct and indirect speech, what they are, what the differences are, and when to use each kind. All right, so let's get into it. So in our last video about when we talked about using quotations, I mentioned reporting verbs. So I'm going to follow that again today. We'll talk about it again. So a reporting verb is used when you have a subject who is the author. So for example, if I say my author's last name is Moore and then the year is 2014 and this is going to be the subject of my sentence, I'm going to need a verb. And what goes here is a reporting verb. So I could say Moore recommended that. So this is your reporting verb. And then after that, we have the word that. And then what follows here can be a quotation, could also be a paraphrase. Today we're going to work with quotations. So there are different kinds of reporting verbs. And if you take a look at what I have listed here, you can see that you probably recognize some of these verbs. It's possible maybe this is the first time you've seen some of these words. And that's okay. Just take some time, look them up, figure out what they mean. But what I want to say about reporting verbs is that because there are different kinds with different meanings, you need to think carefully about what your quotation is actually saying. If you want to use a quotation inside your paper, you need to think about first, what does this quotation actually mean? Okay. Secondly, what is its purpose? In order to effectively use a quotation, you need to think about what was the purpose of this quotation within the article. In other words, what job was it doing in the article? So when we go back and we look at our types of reporting verbs, if you have a quotation that is summarizing results of a study, you're not going to use the verb observe. That wouldn't make sense. Okay? If they're summarizing the results of a study, you might say find. That would make more sense. So I have some more examples to get you thinking about this. If you want to use a quotation from an article, and the sentence that you want to quote proposes an idea. So in the context of the article, if the quote is proposing an idea, what kind of reporting verb can you use? Propose. So I might choose, obviously, the word propose, maybe suggest, or another word like suggest. Okay. What about, we did summarize a study's major results. What about explains an author's position? Explains an author's position. Argue. When an author argues, they're taking a position, right? You might say, depending on how strong you want to be in your reporting verb. Could you say notice? No, notice and observe kind of have similar meanings. So I would see those as more likely to go together. What about describe a study's methods? You could say analyze, because if you're going to describe how they did the study, you could describe how they did their analysis. I think that's probably the best one for that. Yeah. And then in terms of findings, you might say report or demonstrate or show, conclude maybe. So when it comes to using a reporting verb, there's not just one verb that you should always use. Don't always use say. That's a sign of a very weak paper, and it's a sign that you really didn't read the source. So choose your reporting verbs carefully and make sure that they are representing the type of quotation that you're including. And that goes for paraphrases too. All right, so now let's get into what is the difference between direct and indirect speech. So imagine you're in a room and a lot of people are talking and different conversations are happening. And maybe this guy says something like, I bought a new house. Sorry if that's a little hard to read. I bought a new house. And she says, oh, that's great. Then maybe over here, this guy says, what did he just say? And maybe this guy heard, more likely it's probably the woman that heard, because we're very good at hearing other conversations happening. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes if I'm in a conversation that's boring and something else is more interesting happening over there, I might just start listening over there and forget about what's going on here. Small confession. It's true though. All right. So if he says, what did he just say? He might say, oh, he said that he had just bought a house. Okay? So this is the direct speech. This is the indirect. What this guy says here is indirect. What this guy says here is direct. Okay? So direct speech, we can also call it quoted speech. It's repeating exactly the words of what someone said. We're going to use quotation marks to show that these are the exact words that someone else said. This is a standard in American English writing, and Westward writing in particular, that we don't want to take credit for someone else's words or ideas if they come from that person. So we're very concerned about making sure that we use quotation marks to give people credit where their credit is due. So here's a non-academic example. You need to develop a good hook for your paper, the teacher said. That's an example of direct speech, direct non-academic speech. So an academic example, heavy sugar consumption correlates with increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And then in our parentheses, we have the author, the year, and the page number where we find that quote. So that's a direct quote. So indirect speech is our reporting the idea of what someone said. And the idea could be a paraphrase, or it could be almost the exact words with a few changes in pronouns and verb tenses. So reported speech has that coming before it. So if I go back a few slides, that's what I was pointing out here. Okay, after your reported verb, you have that, and then your quotation or your paraphrase. All right, you do not use quotation marks for indirect reported speech. So a non-academic, my example, when I turn it into indirect speech, the teacher said that I need to develop a good hook for my paper. Okay. My academic example, when it becomes indirect speech, I start with Nelson, I have the year, found that there is a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes for people who consume large amounts of sugar. And here I'm pointing out that I'm using a paraphrase here. This is a paraphrase. So I want to show you that it's possible to also have a paraphrase after a reporting verb and that. Okay. All right. So let's do a little practice. Here are 4 examples. Pause the video right now and see if you can tell if this is direct or indirect speech. All right, let's check it. So the first one, what are our clues? Well, we see quotation marks, right? I don't see a reporting verb. I don't see that. So this is direct speech. Okay. What about this one? No quotation marks. I see said. I see that. This is indirect. Oh, I also want to point out that it's possible to take out that. Sometimes it's missing, especially in conversation. People will leave out that all the time. Okay. We could say, you said you were going to help me. Okay. All right, here. Did you say there was going to be new vocabulary on the quiz? That's something I hear all the time when I teach. What did you say, teacher? Did you say this? Did you say that? And here, I don't have that, right? I also don't have quotation marks. Even if this person is saying, let's imagine that this person is saying this out loud, but they're talking about what someone else said. So this is indirect speech because they're asking about what someone else said. How about here? I live for chocolate, she confessed. If I don't have chocolate, I don't have anything. This is direct. Okay. All right, so let's take a moment and let's actually go and take a look at an article and analyze, let's identify and let's analyze some of these examples of reported speech. All right, so here I'm looking at The Atlantic, which I think is a fantastic a journalistic site if you're looking for really easy, not necessarily easy to read, but really interesting, well-researched and relevant and engaging. That's a really good word for it. Engaging news and commentary. All right, so this one is about children are getting great practice at being sold to all the time. This is coming from that topic that we were investigating before, advertising to children. All right, so we can see here's our author. Our author is Pinsker, and we have a date, so that's nice. So if we're going to cite this source in our work, we're going to have Pinsker and then parentheses 2018 is the year. All right, so already I see... See if I can highlight that. Maybe. Oh. No, apparently not. It's not going to let me highlight it. So I'll just point out, we see determined that. A recent study determined that. So here's our reporting verb, determined. And, it's interesting. They put these words in quotation marks. So they're actually showing you words that come from that study. Okay. All right, so let's look at our first couple paragraphs. It found that the most frequently downloaded apps aimed at children 5 years and under contain loads of advertising. Well, another reason not to give your child your phone, I guess, right? Okay, I think make this a little bit bigger for you, if I can. There we go. All right. So that was our first one. We see it found that. So there's our reporting verb and that. And then this idea with the most frequently, that is, it looks like either a summary or a paraphrase. probably a paraphrase because it's pretty specific information. And they use the word educational in quotation marks to show that that's the word that the study used. All right, and then let's look at this paragraph. We see again some words that are coming directly from that study. Well, this is interesting. Once we get here, now we have a direct quotation from Mara Einstein, the chair of media studies. Okay, so these are directly her words, which she has said when this magazine talked to her. And they give her credentials. That's nice. So we know that she has pathos. She has credibility. So we can believe her. She says that among marketers, this understanding is, and now we have a direct quotation of what she says. So this article starts with an indirect, well, it's kind of like half paraphrase, and then it ends with a quotation. And we have our reporting verb right before it with that. All right. Okay, now we have another direct quotation from her. Interesting. Inside her quotation, she has a quote. So what happens if you're quoting somebody and they quote inside? This is what happens. You have the double quotes here and then a single quote before the quote inside the quote, if that makes sense. Let's keep going. Oh, I see. The researchers noted that some of what they'd seen, okay? Oh, there we go. You know, it's weird. Like my stylus, it wouldn't recognize it, but the mouse, it did. So there you go. So I'll just use that from now on. What else can we find in here? Okay, so this is interesting. Here's an example where we have a professor, Dr. Amy Jordan, okay? But you don't see quotation marks. So my guess here is that this is probably a paraphrase or a summary of what she said. And then later on in the article, we actually get some direct quotations directly from her. She told me. Me is the reporter. She told me that it isn't until around age 6 or 7 that kids develop the ability to think critically. Let's try just a little bit more. I won't go on too much longer. I just want you to get an idea of what these look like. I asked her what her dream regulations for children's advertisements would look like. She says, if I were queen and everyone listened to my rules, here's her quotation. So notice at this point that if you have a quotation and you interrupt it with the she said, this is how you do it. Quotation, words, comma, quotation, she said, comma, and then open the quotation again. And then when she's done talking, close the quotation. Okay. All right, one more, just one more. The authors of a 2015 paper noted that many apps considered blah, 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 blah. There we go. Wrote that. So you can see like this is very common to see in research papers and magazines that are giving credit to their sources. All right. So if you like that source and you want to read it on your own, I've included that here on the slide. I'm also going to include it in the description of this video so you can link directly to it. All right, so let's talk now about how we change our verb tense in reported speech. So when we move from direct speech to reported speech, Sometimes there are changes that we have to make. In general, the rule is that we are going to shift backward in time when we go to reported speech. So if we start in present, we're going to move to past. There are some exceptions, so let's talk about that. So again, here's the situation. We have this guy saying, let's make it easy. It was A. Oh, A. And then over here, this person's like, what did he say? And this guy says, oh, he said A, right? Or he said that A, okay? That's the idea. And A can be anything. All right, so when we move from direct to indirect speech, what does that look like? So if she said, comma, I love to eat sushi. What does that look like in indirect speech? Simple present is going to become simple past. So it looks like this. She said that she loved to eat sushi. Okay? What happens when it's she said, I finished my essay? So the verb here is simple past. Well, in indirect reported speech, it becomes past perfect. What does that look like? Looks like this. She said that she had finished her essay. All right, so past perfect has a past participle and it has had. Always had. Not has, not have, because that's present perfect. Okay, so past perfect has the word had and a past participle. All right, so notice here. What if she said, I had forgotten that it was your birthday last week? What does that look like when we go to indirect speech? So past perfect, we're not going to have a change. All right? But notice there's another verb here, was. Was is going to change. What is was going to become? She said that she had forgotten that it had been your birthday last week. Okay. Some people might ask, can we say was? You could, but I'm just being consistent here. All right. So when our tense change is not used in reported speech. So there are three situations that could happen. Something that someone just said, maybe just like a short time ago. Maybe then we wouldn't need to change the verb tense. Something that's still true. Or it could be some statement of fact, a general truth, or some scientific law that doesn't change. So here are some examples. So something that someone just said. So in direct speech, someone says, I'm hungry. Someone said, what did you say? Like they didn't hear. It's too loud. There are too many people talking. A says, I said I was hungry. Or I said I'm hungry. Both of those are fine. And it's just, I really don't think that there's a rhyme or reason about which tense a person chooses to say for that indirect speech. I'm hungry. What did you say? I said I'm hungry. Or said I was hungry. Okay. Something that's still true. So if the direct speech is the paper is due soon, they said. Maybe a group is working on a project. Our indirect speech would be they said that the paper is due soon, or they said the paper was due soon. Both of those are possible. Okay, so again, the situation was someone just said it, or it's still true. Here's a situation with the general truth or scientific fact. Pluto is no longer considered a planet. Poor Pluto. The indirect speech. we learned that Pluto is no longer considered a planet. Or we learned that Pluto was no longer considered a planet. Both of those are fine. All right, so let's do some practice. All right, our direct speech. The apples are grown in our orchard, the farmer said. That's our first example. And 2, we picked the apples yesterday, she said. So pause the video here and write out how you would change those verb tenses into indirect speech. Here we go. All right, so if the first one becomes indirect, we would see something like, the farmer said that the apples were grown in probably there. Wouldn't be our again, right? Because now we're talking about what he said. Since he made this plural, I would change it to there. So the 2 words that need to be changed are here. All right, let's try this one. All right, she said that, yeah, I know I'm kind of mean. I didn't tell you about the pronoun thing, but it's a little bit, it's critical thinking. You have to think about the situation. She said that they picked the apples yesterday. Oh, I cannot write today. There we go. Okay, so, oh, sorry. I'm like, that doesn't sound quite right. That they had picked the apples yesterday. There you go. And in another video, we're going to talk about changing time frames. You might also see this. It depends on how far removed we get from the situation. If we're reporting this, days later and not just on the same day, if we're reporting this maybe the next day or the day after that, we would change yesterday to the day before because the time reference changes. And we'll talk about that in another video. Today we'll just focus on the verb tenses. Oh, look at that delicious cup of coffee. All right, so if I am going to change these 2, this is a little more challenging because I didn't talk about present progressive. So pause the video here and see if you can change these. You ready? All right, let's try it. So this one would be, she exclaimed that, how about that, right? Because we're removing ourselves from it. That was, because I'm changing this, and I'm changing is, right? The best cup of coffee she had ever had. All right, and I know it might look a little funny to you if you've never seen have in the past perfect, but that's what have looks like in the past perfect. Had. Little bananas, I'm sorry. All right, how about this one? I don't even have a he or she said. Maybe let's just say it's she. She said that she was going, because here we have am going, okay? So we're going to change it to past progressive with she. She was going to post the picture because we're removed from it now. So it's not going to be this, the picture to Instagram right then. That's how we would say it, because we're removing ourselves from the from the time, from the place, from the situation. She said that she was going to post the picture to Instagram right then. Sorry, that's so messy. All right. And last one. Who doesn't love a dog? All right, this one's more challenging again. The direct quote is, "My dog is missing," she told her friend. And direct, "I will give $100 to anyone who can find her," she said. So take a minute, see if you can do those. All right, here we go. All right. She told her friend that her dog was missing. Okay, not too bad. Now this one gets a little more complicated because we see will, and I didn't tell you what to do with will, right? All right, so we'll talk about that in greater detail in a later video. But I will show you now how we do that. She said, I know I'm so mean. She said that she would give $100 to anyone who could find her. And I'll just add dog so it's clear. All right, so that brings us to the end. So we'll wrap up here, and I'll say congratulations on sticking with me that long. I hope that you got a lot about this video, and if you have any questions or any particular examples that you want to share, please do share in the comments to this video. Thanks for joining me, and I'll definitely see you next time.